So is the Prime Minister's attack on the investigating agency justified, or is it really, in a sense, a cover-up for the government's own failings as far as corruption is concerned? Joining us tonight, the former director of the CBI, Mr. D.R. Karthikeyan, joins us from Delhi. Here in the studio with us, commentator Ashok Malik. Mr. Karthikeyan, I just wanted your thoughts on the Prime Minister's comments today. What are the one or two things you think that the CBI needs to listen to carefully, especially where he talked about, policy sitting in judgment, talking about the fact that even when an investigation is on, it is often leaked to the media and everybody jumps to conclusions in the process. Do you think these were important points that the agency needed to listen to as well?
I don't think it's criticism of the functioning of the CBI. As the executive head, he has got the right to express his views on advising. And of course, the investigating agency has no right to sit in judgment over policies. There's no doubt about it. And also, it's not good to leak information when matters are under investigation. I mean, it's agreeable to everybody. I don't think it's a criticism as such. But in matters which are monitored by the highest court in the land, the CBI has to go through a logical process of investigation, because they have to explain the various investigations expected to be handled by the CBI. And when during a preliminary investigation they find something has been gone wrong seriously, decisions have been overtaken and no justification is given on the file, so they have just registered an FIR. Well, whether the FIR is justified or not, it depends upon each case.
But I think the reason why it's raising eyebrows today, Ashok, is because of the timing, because the government and the PMO in particular finds itself on the back foot as far as the coal scam is concerned and the recent FIR is concerned. So when you look at these comments in that context, what do you make of it?
See, there are two things. I was at a conference in Mumbai over the weekend, and somebody there made a very telling point. He said the CBI and other such institutions, including the media, need to distinguish between fraud, error of judgment and plain bad luck. And I think the PM made this point today, and that is well taken. Having said that, how can he say that there was no evidence of malafide? Because in the case of the coal allocations, I'm not going into his role in particular, in the case of the coal allocations, coal mine after coal mine, coal block after coal block has been given to companies that did not deserve those coal blocks and have not used them properly. So how, and are really owned by people who are related to senior politicians or ministers and so on. So how can he say there is no prima facie case of malafide? It has to be investigated. Second, he says there should not be any leaks to the media or to
when an investigation is ongoing.
That's true, but there shouldn't be leaks to the government as well. And you shouldn't have a law minister calling in the CBI and saying, leak the information to me before you give it to the courts.
There was also another important point on the issue of the CBI's autonomy, Mr. Karthikeyan, and the Prime Minister made it clear that the CBI as an investigation agency comes under the executive, and that clearly it has operational autonomy, but on other matters it has to come under the political executive. There's been such a fierce debate, sir, about the autonomy for the agency at this point. The CBI has even told the Supreme Court that no one is willing to grant them even an inch of autonomy, and all political parties want a stranglehold over its functioning. But does the PM have a point? Can you have an agency, a police agency with all powers vested in it with absolutely no executive control?
So the Prime Minister also, I was there in the auditorium, he said as matters on investigation, nobody can interfere with investigation excepting the supervisory officers who are responsible to the court and to the ultimately. And he said no one can interfere in the investigation. He was talking about an oversight, and nobody says you give total freedom to CBI in every way of functioning. There is a need for an oversight, but if the oversight mechanism should be credible, impartial, and people should have faith, the court should have faith that they are functioning in an impartial manner, not carrying out the mandate of the party in power.
And it is about a credible oversight mechanism at the end of the day. And again, these comments actually, when looked at they make sense. You can't have a police agency which
You
doesn't have a
certainly
credible
can't have a police
oversight.
agency which is completely autonomous, because with due respects, Mr. Karthikeyan was a great CBI director, but you may have a CBI director who goes wild and runs amok. So you can't have the CBI being completely autonomous. The CBI is a part of the Indian state as represented by the government, so on issues of salary, travel, all of that, it needs administrative supervision by the government. But the whole point is we are talking about power to and autonomy to investigate freely and fairly. That is a line the Prime Minister sort of dismissed.
Yes,
that's the point he dismissed in this one line.
They have that freedom.
But that is at the heart of this whole debate over the CBI, not just in the past 2 years, but over the past several years, involving several governments. That autonomy has to be institutionalized, autonomy of investigation. And the appointment of the CBI director has to be a more bipartisan and independent process.
Abhishek Singh joins us now from the Congress Party. Dr. Singh, the question is that the Prime Minister's criticisms of the CBI and its role come at a time, as we were just talking just before you came on, at a time when there's so much heat that he's facing on the coal issue. There was also a strange link that he drew between corruption and economic growth. Can you explain that for us? Because it actually sounds a little astounding to say that, well, corruption isn't such a bad thing. It shows that we're growing as an economy.
Nidhi, allow me my minute or so, because there are lots and lots of misconceptions about a perfectly good and a normal speech. A storm in a teacup is sought to be made when the teacup doesn't even have a ripple. And there's a complete distortion in some quarters of the speech. And let me point out why. First of all, the Prime Minister has in fact endorsed the operational autonomy of the CBI, as you've just heard from other panelists. Secondly, anybody who suggests that a body like the CBI, or for that matter the CAG, the Election Commission, or a number of other constitutional bodies or even statutory bodies